DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, how you been, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. So you know what? We're still closing in on election day. Are you a little nervous or what? A little concerned?
I'm not running, so I'm not nervous.
Wow, wow. In terms of the outcome, you don't even focus on that at all. Is that
No, of course I'm scared.
I got you. I got you.
I'm scared to death.
I hear you.
But I maintain a brave front.
Yes, you do. You do it quite well, Night Watchman. You really do.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, though, Night Watchman, tell me back in the day, do you remember Jerry Lewis and the telethon that he used to have, right?
I do, yes. For muscular dystrophy, I believe.
Exactly. It was always, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Labor Day weekend.
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. But then, do you remember a short-lived, I remember, fundraiser for sickle cell anemia?
I do.
Okay. Where was that run? I don't really remember that one much.
Do we really have to go back and figure out how bad our memories are?
Wow. See, Night Watchman. See. Okay. Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about sickle cell anemia because it seems to have actually disappeared from the playing field of discussion. One of the people I didn't even know, would be a part of the show is my man, and we're talking about Community Board 9, the one, the only, Victor Edwards. Yes.
Welcome, Victor.
Thank you.
All right.
Gentlemen. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my brother.
Very important topic.
Yeah, because you remember, of course, the Jerry Lewis one, but not so much in terms of the sickle cell one, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Jerry Lewis, I definitely remember. Sickle cell one, I don't recall that well.
Gotcha. Well, funny enough, Night Watchman, there's a woman who is actually an advocate in that space of sickle cell, and that could only be Ginger Davis. Let's bring her up. Hey.
Greetings, Night Watchman. And
welcome.
And good day to you, Mr. Edwards. Good to. Well, I'm finally seeing you. I heard you last week, but I'm finally getting to see you. So I'm going to answer that trivia question. And that was July 21st, 1973, hosted by Nipsey Russell. And it happened.
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
Woo. Oh, boy.
We need to keep you around for crossword and trivia.
Yes.
Although that's not trivial. I don't want to say that was trivial.
Television, I got you.
Wow.
Now, Ginger, what does SCTPN stand for?
It stands for the Sickle Cell Thalassemia Patients Networks.
Wow.
We are a statewide organization based in Brooklyn, started by adults and adults living with sickle cell and thalassemia, both inherited blood disorders. And they were patients of Dr. Rita Bellevue, who is our chair emeritus at what used to be Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, now Interfaith, and that was 36 years ago. So I inherited the legacy organization in 2021. And I'm in my third year of the presidency. And during that, one of the things that I wanted to do was to make sure that individuals, families throughout New York State had social supports and referrals to service and other things that were needed. So we expanded, and we're in Buffalo, Albany, Rochester, Westchester. We're looking to develop Syracuse. We're redeveloping Long Island, also the 5 boroughs. And next month, I guess my project director is going with our consultant to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and we're establishing a chapter in St. Thomas, which is part of our genetic region. And internationally, we are in Belize, Uganda, and Belize with affiliates.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And so, Night Watchman, we definitely have to have the health providers. So you know what? I want to bring up Dr. Cheryl Mensah. Bring her on up.
Hey. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Doc. Yes, welcome to Soul Lounge Primetime for sure. And so, do tell me, because I, of course, go to, I would say, an affiliate of Northwell with my urologist. So major props to you guys and stuff that I see that you're also doing some thing with the Zucker School of Medicine.
Yes. I'm an assistant professor there with the medical school, Hofstra School of Medicine / Zucker School of Medicine.
Very nice. And so sickle cell, have you been in that space? Because I understand that you have a story to tell, and I want to get to you because I want to hear that story. Okay.
Yes. I like sickle cell disease probably since my fellowship days. I did my fellowship at North Shore LIJ. I'd always had family friends who had sickle cell disease. My parents are originally from Ghana in West Africa. There's a high incidence of sickle cell disease. But during my fellowship, we had a large number of sickle cell patients that we would take care of. And I felt a bond with the patients. And what really drew me to it was I had one patient who I was treating in the clinic, and our program director, who was the head of our entire program, he saw the patient and he gave her recommendations of how to take care of her. And the patient was like, no, my doctor is Dr. Mensah. Talk to her first before talking to me. And that's when I realized, oh, you know what? The bond is mutual. And so I liked the patients, the growth and the science of it all. And so I've been doing it ever since, and I really enjoy it.
Beautiful. Well, welcome. And Night Watchman, not only you're a doctor, but also we have to talk about the treatments. We have to talk about the pharmaceuticals. We have to, of course, then talk about Dr. Baisong May. Bring him out. Doctor.
Good evening,
Welcome.
everyone. Welcome. So you have to really, because like I said, I'm an old guy. I grew up there in the 60s, early 70s. And so I don't really know what advances have occurred in the field or treatment of sickle cell. Can you tell me some of the things that have happened?
Absolutely. It's a very exciting time now that given the science advancement and there's a lot of more drug development for treating sickle cell disease. As Cheryl just mentioned, that the patients are really suffering from the disease, but the treatment options are limited. But over the last 10 years or so, there's just a lot of development and the new science come in and more intention in that. But I would say the reason for the last 10 years over the development of drug development for the sickle cell disease is largely contributed by the patient community. They are the advocates, as Ginger just mentioned, that we need to work together as partners to advance the treatment for sickle cell disease, which I very much enjoy, and not only work on the science and the medicine, but also working with sickle cell communities and listen from them and get encouragement from them, and to work on these devastating disease.
Got you. Well, before we actually went live, I know, Victor, you were going to share a story about your personal knowledge and being affected by sickle cell. I believe a friend of yours, is that correct?
Yes, a very close friend of mine had sickle cell, and I'm in touch with her constantly, and I've talked to her during some of her crises, and they told her life expectancy was very short, when she was a teenager, that maybe in her 20s, and she's now in her mid 70s and still here.
Wow.
Her husband was actually a doctor who passed away early on in life, and she raised 4 beautiful daughters, one of which is my goddaughter.
Beautiful.
So I'm in touch with the family quite often. One's a doctor, one's a lawyer, one's an associate dean at Columbia University, and the other one is in the arts. But she has told me time and time again where she's gone for help to the hospital, where they have said on occasion, you're just here for the drugs. I've asked her about that, and she said that is common among patients at certain times. They think you're just coming for the drugs itself and not for the care. But she's been an advocate, and I always applaud her for what she's done as a sickle cell survivor. I know it affects our community much more than any other community. The awareness is not that great in our community, and I think we need to raise that. As a community board, we keep trying to advocate for things that affect our community in particular, and keep the word out there that there's treatments that are on the horizon, and we just hope we can help in some way to keep, as advocates, to keep the word out there.
Beautiful, beautiful. And one of the things that certainly that I heard from you, Dr. May, is what helps in the advancement are the advocates, are those one who actually work with the medical community to really advocate and see, just put their trials out there. So, Ginger, do tell me, in terms of the relationship that you have with the medical community, have you been able to see the advances in treatments?
Absolutely. I began advocating as a child living with sickle cell disease in honor of my brother Mark Anthony, who unfortunately did not get diagnosed. I was fortunate to get diagnosed at the age of 2, and for 8 years after that, doctors kept telling my mother every year that I was going to die. And I just asked God for one thing: let me outlive her. And I got the one wish that I ever asked for, because my mother had already lost 2 children. Not sure that my eldest sister was from sickle cell, but I do know my brother before me. Mom was 6 months pregnant with me when he died in her arms at 18 months because of not being diagnosed and not getting proper treatment. But from then to now, it's been 50 years.
Wow.
Before, since the last real clinical trial that I remember as a child, something with urea, and our pediatrician's like, no, you're not putting my child in that. It's not going to work. It's not good. And, now, and I don't remember, I think this was in the 90s, maybe, Dr. Francis Collins said to me, you're going to see a cure in your lifetime. And now here we are.
Wow.
We have an approved cell therapy. We have an approved gene editing therapy. And there's a lot more companies researching in those 2 spaces. We have a lot of disease modifying medication. I happen to be on a clinical trial right now. I can tell you the medications is working fabulously. Beautiful. I also am on one of the 3 approved medications, the first one to be approved in 2017. And those combination of medications is keeping me healthy.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
So, working, and there's a term, patient centricity. Companies that practice that, which means having either the caregiver and or the patient sit with you at the table when the clinical trial design is beginning, not after, here we have this for you, but to start the conversation is, what does the community need? How can we do this? And what is the best way? And companies that do that succeed. Companies that don't, not so much.
Gotcha. Well, certainly, Dr. Mensah, we certainly do know that in terms of, let's say, coverage of events happening in Africa, very small, okay? Or we might paint it with a broad brush. Africa, one country. No, that's not the case at all. We know this. But having said that, we certainly do know, I remember when former president, I believe it was Bush, providing, let's say, AIDS treatment medicines to Africa. Has the same focus and attention been on sickle cell, getting some of the treatments there?
I will say yes. There has been, just like there's been progress in the United States for sickle cell disease and the different medications, there is progress in Africa. I'd say mostly like Nigeria and Ghana. I think part of the limitations, though, are cost. I think right now the focus is more on getting hydroxyurea, one of the earlier medications, to patients. But some of the newer medications that have come out, especially like the new IV medications and some of the more expensive medications, those ones I think it may take a while for the average patient, in Nigeria or Ghana or in West Africa to have access to those medications. But I think that a lot of progress has been being made, all over the world, and even the mortality rate hasn't been improving. And so there's progress being made, but there's a long way to go.
Gotcha. Okay, so then let me find out this, because I definitely heard gene therapy, I heard gene splicing, whatnot. I do know that there had been a big debate about, let's say, stem cell type research. I got to say, in science, a lot of times, Doc, the genie gets out the bottle, so to speak, and you can't put the genie back. So you got to tell me some of the research that you guys are doing there at Editas, or how am I pronouncing it?
Editas. Yeah.
Thank you. So tell me about some of the stuff that you guys are working on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So Editas is one of the pioneers in the gene editing field, to use that gene editing technology to develop a drug for treating devastating diseases. And the specific technology we call the CRISPR gene editing technology, that is that win the Nobel Prize in 2020.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So maybe just very briefly, what we're trying to do is trying to modify the gene which causes the disease. Right? So if we know that specific disease like a sickle cell is a specific mutation on the gene that causes disease. So the idea is, how can we make the genetic change and to be able to cure the disease? So that's kind of just a nutshell of that gene editing perspective. So we're treating, right now we use reni-cel to treat sickle cell and Thalassemia, and we're thinking this technology can be used for treating many other diseases. But that is only win a Nobel Prize in 2020. The publications back in 2010 to 2011.
Wow,
so we
that
now
long.
already advanced quite quickly.
Yes. Wow. So okay.
So now, can we
Go
take
ahead.
a second and just
Yep.
frame for the layman what sickle cell actually is? What is
Very
this?
good.
How does this disease manifest itself in layman's terms, and what are the symptoms that people see, and how is it usually discovered?
Yeah. Maybe Cheryl, you should provide that. You see
Yes.
patients.
So sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder. So patients are born with it. It could happen to people of any ethnicity, but it's more common in people with African descent. It's usually diagnosed. There's a newborn screening that happens across the United States. When a baby is born, they prick the heel, they take the blood, and they test it. What it is that, our red blood cells, we have hemoglobin, and that's where oxygen sticks to, and our red cells carry oxygen to our organs. With sickle cell, the hemoglobin, it changes shape under stress. So when there's less oxygen or there's any stress in the body, the cells change shape from being round to being irregularly shaped.
Wow.
And these misshapen cells, they can block the blood vessels in the body, and there's lack of oxygen to the different parts of the body. So the patients will feel pain in areas where there's less oxygen. And for many patients, this can cause a pain crisis, especially when there's a lot of stress. And so the patients can have pain crisis, pain in different areas, and they can go to the hospital and get hospitalized and receive pain medications and fluids. And so all those different things can affect the life expectancy too of patients and cause organ damage for the patients over time.
Ooh, okay.
If I may chime in, so
Absolutely.
the newborn screening test that Dr. Mensah mentioned was founded by two New Yorkers, two beautiful women who are no longer with us, Dr. Doris Weathers and Dr. Jeannie Francis. New York was the first state to have a newborn screening program, which has now gone global. And so all children, and there were 11 states that were holdouts for a very long time, and they were all finally forced to join this program through the Department of Health to test every child, not just children possibly with sickle cell disease, but there's a whole panel of rare disorders and what's known as metabolic disorders in children, because there are some conditions, if you don't diagnose them right away, the child can die within days or a couple of weeks. And so this has been going on here in New York since 1973 by these two amazing women. And I just want to, the things that we invent as a people out of necessity, to talk about Black inventors. And I just wanted to give them credit for that.
Thank you so much for that.
Yes, absolutely. And NightWatchman, tell me, and also Victor, you probably know this too. We remember back in the 70s, there was a film, and I believe it was Three the Hard Way. Jim Brown, Jim Kelly, Fred Williamson, and Lord, we talked about, let's say, a substance that when put in the water only affected certain people from a certain ethnicity. So I'm saying that with you, Victor, and talking about your friend suffering, that their pain not taken into consideration. Do you find that that type of thing occurs more often with people of color? Just wondering that their pain or symptoms not being taken seriously. Yes.
I would say yes. I would say that is more prevalent in our communities than others, brushed off, and not treated at all. So that's an issue, and just awareness in our community, getting the word out. I was going to ask Dr. Ginger Davis if that test is done in all hospitals throughout the community. Sometimes things that are done in other communities are not done in ours. I just wanted to ask that question if that's done citywide or statewide to make sure we're getting the treatment we should have at an early stage.
It is statewide and national. They're going, so all hospitals have to test.
Gotcha.
You
Great.
know, across
Thank
the
you.
board, no excuses, no nothing. So it's done before the child leaves. Usually, hospitalization is 3 days after birth, unless there's a problem, and it is done during right after birth, and you get the results in 2 weeks. You know, and to talk about sickle cell specifically, with this is the most definitive test called the hemoglobin electrophoresis, and it'll say if you have sickle cell trait, if you have sickle cell disease, and also very little known fact, there is more than one sickle cell trait that can be inherited in any combination, and there are about 22 abnormal genes, hemoglobin genes that associated with sickle cell directly, and so you have the SS, which is the most common, SC, the second most common, S beta thal, third most, but then you have SH, SB, there's BBHH, there's all of these combinations that affect people differently. You can see sickle cell impact siblings differently. One may be more sicker than the other, and just to get back to the treatment, the standard treatment when you come into an emergency room, particularly, the problems are in the adult population, not pediatric, is hydration through IV fluids, pain management. Usually it could be opioid or non-opioid, but nothing like way stronger than anything you can buy in the pharmacy. And if there's an infection, antibiotics. So that's the basic treatment for sickle cell. So when they say you're coming in for the drugs, the answer is yes, we are. We've already tried to manage at home. Not enough. We don't do opioids at home. We try not to do opioids at home. Some people have morphine and Dilaudid at home, which I'm opposed to. If you need drugs that strong, you should be in the hospital.
Wow.
So by the time you get there, you're in what's known as an acute crisis, which is severe pain. And people who are healthy have no idea what that pain is like, how intense it is. If you can think of being hit by a bus or beaten
Wow.
your life by a mob, that's what our pain is, and that can start as early as 5 months of age.
Yeah, and with that, Dr. Davis, I mean, 5 months of age, you can't communicate. How does one then know what the affliction is?
You're just crying. I mean, you're already been diagnosed, so when the child starts crying unconsolably, and you may see swelling in the hand and feet, swelling in the abdomen, right away you have to get your child to the hospital. And that can go on from infancy up to about age 2. The swelling in the feet is called dactylitis. So it's a very telling thing. And parents are taught how to feel their child's abdomen, because the spleen, which is the organ that filters out broken cells and sludge from the bloodstream, can become impacted and swell. And you have 2 hours to get a child into treatment. They could die from that. So this is a very life-threatening disease that we're dealing with. And because it's the blood, it affects every organ and every organ system in our body. This crisis can happen anywhere. In your brain, it's a stroke. A clot in your lungs is a pulmonary embolism. It can happen in your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your muscles, your bones. And it's progressive, because even without pain, the cell's still breaking down, known as hemolytic anemia, causes damage very quietly. And you don't know until a complication presents itself. And you're like, oh my God, what is this? And you're being diagnosed with some complication as a result of this disease.
Wow, wow. Nice.
So
Go ahead.
this the early testing, do you have any data to show how it's affected the early diagnosis and treatment?
No, I will say that in America, because of newborn screening, children are identified early. There is penicillin given to babies, and they take until age 5. They get certain vaccinations, like pneumonia vaccinations, and the mortality rate is a lot lower in the U.S. compared to like West Africa, for example. Majority of children are living to adulthood, where other parts of the world, almost half the children have some sort of infection or death prior to age 5. And so the newborn screening is one of the reasons why lives are saved in the U.S. and children are living a lot longer with sickle cell compared to other parts of the world.
Wow. And Dr. May, certainly we do know that as it relates to, let's say, pharmaceuticals, there's a substantial investment in R&D. Okay. You got to recapture that, no doubt about it. Are there any, let's say, of these billionaires? Because I certainly know that Gates Foundation, you know, they definitely put a lot of funds in terms of give back and putting treatments into Africa. Are there any folk that you can identify who've been supportive of, let's say, sickle cell? I certainly haven't heard it, but.
There is a lot of development in the space, right? From both the supporting the sickle cell drug development. Actually, Gates Foundation is involved. Not only, Gates Foundation is involved.
Nice.
And they actually recently signed an agreement with one pharmaceutical company trying to develop the drug. Not only develop the drug for sickle cell treatment, but also develop the drug which could be able to be a good cost of goods to be able to treat patients not only in the United States and developed world, but also in Africa. So that's absolutely momentum we are experiencing. Again, I just mentioned that you can see that all this effort is together with organization like Gates Foundation, the pharmaceutical company, and very, very important, as Ginger mentioned, is actually patient community. We have to work together on that.
Gotcha. And NightWatchman, what you got?
I'm just absorbing all this. First of all, it's great to hear from Dr. Davis just a framework of how this drug impacts people, and also what those solutions have been along the way. I'm curious to just talk a little bit about the economics of drug development and how that's affected the development, because I know that let's face it, pharmaceutical is a business, and they look at the size of markets, relative to how they invest. And, erectile dysfunction probably gets an inordinate amount of research because they know that there's a huge market for it. So is there a balance somewhere? Are there foundations like the Ford Foundation or other foundations? Do they throw extra money into research to kind of offset the fact that maybe sickle cell doesn't have the projected reach that other situations may have?
Okay, so you just opened Pandora's box.
Oh, here we go.
Sickle cell disease is the most prevalent rare disorder or inherited disorder in the world. Number one, bar none. We have the largest population in the United States, the largest population globally. Africa is predominant. India is the second largest population. India has over 1 billion people.
Wow.
Right? And the things that are happening in India around sickle cell, it's a shame that it's not going on here. They have a program to eradicate sickle cell by 2050. And that's by testing everyone, providing genetic counseling, and making sure people with the trait don't marry. Talking about investment, pharmaceuticals are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Research costs hundreds of millions of dollars. You have small companies like Editas who are entering into space, who are now getting backing by investment banks to do this research. But you have rare disease, other rare disease with smaller populations who get 8 times more money than sickle cell disease.
Wow.
And it is an ethnicity problem because it is erroneously typed as a black disease, an African American disease. It is not. It's a human disease. You have Greeks, Italians, Turks, Southern Chinese, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Central and South America, the Caribbean. It's all over the world. Southern Asia. Excuse me, Europe. It's all over the world. But because it is typified as a black disease, I'm just going to say it. Racism has damaged the progress, which more than 100 years ago it was given a name, and it has taken 50 years since the first few trials to get to where we are today. We're excited about all of the things that are happening, but I see the small companies really trying. The first company to come to market with a new medication does not have the bankroll of big pharmaceutical companies, but they are out there getting their medication approved globally, right? And the cost to even just go through a clinical trial in another company can be prohibitive. But this is what you have to do before you can even get it on the market. You have to get it into clinical trials. You have to get it approved by, let's say, the FDA component in whatever country you're going into. And to do this around the world where populations exist. What is I'm going to say Emmaus with their drug Endari has gotten it approved in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia. They're working on getting it approved in the EU. They've been approved here in the US since 2017, the first medication specific to sickle cell. Hydroxyurea is a repurposed drug from cancer. And that's a positive effect, but the first to be specifically for sickle cell is Endari. And but they're a small company, so finance is the determination. And when you're talking about going into other countries, particularly to Africa, you have to deal with government. Is the government stale? Is the economy stale? Do you have leaders that are not trying to get
their piece? Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I I actually met the founder of Emmaus several years ago, and that's kind of how I knew to frame that question, because I knew the struggles that he went through just to get the funding for his company. And it's good to see that they've made it where they are. But as you said, they're a small company relative to the huge pharmaceutical giants that we know of.
Yes.
And but the small companies, they care. They actually care about what's going on in this space and trying to come up with a solution.
And we have very close relationships with these small companies. They work one-on-one with us, and it's not always about money. Yes, they do support community-based organizations through sponsorships and grants, but it is helping us to do public education, helping us to let people know that these clinical trials and these medications are available. And that's where we struggle, because we don't have money to do paid advertising on television and radio. And so coming to shows like this to talk about sickle cell, to talk about the advances that are happening in therapies is so vitally important. And it's taking us longer to get to larger populations because, we spend most of our money providing support directly to families and to the community.
Gotcha.
So for let me ask you, Dr. Davis, for a family that has the misfortune to find a child that is now diagnosed with it, what should they know going into this? What can you share that will help them along their journey?
Do not live in a silo. You're not going through this by yourself. There's thousands of families. We have between 12 and 14,000 families in New York State, 80% of which are in the 5 boroughs, Brooklyn the largest, second by Bronx, right? So there are people around you. You have to find your network. I would caution, other families and friends to become a support, network for that parent and for those children. It's hard. Most of our families are living under the poverty line in the United States because they've become dependent on government subsidies. A parent cannot work. If you have one or more children with sickle cell disease, it's impossible to keep a job. They always ask you to leave or fire you.
Yes.
And so families are forced into public assistance, Medicaid, housing subsidies to get by, and you're living, from bill to bill every year.
Wow.
Every
Wow.
month, every year. So our families are in poverty for the most part. For the few families that are fortunate to have working families, the cost for care and for medications is exorbitant. And and then they have to become, each family and each even child has to become an advocate. And it's I've had a conversation with another doctor recently about why do we have to advocate for ourselves. People should know if you're coming into the health profession, if you're a teacher, you're dealing with children and adults with disabilities. We should just get what federal law provides for, with inalienable rights from the Constitution provides for, but it doesn't happen that way. So we have to literally, in pain, have to advocate and fight for care at times, and that starts as early as the age of 15, when somebody starts to view you as a drug seeker. And I ask people, if you had a migraine headache, what is the first thing you're going to do?
Yeah. You
You
reach for that pain medication.
For that pain medication. So people whose number one symptom in the disease is pain, why would you stigmatize that person? And what that leads to is medical neglect and malpractice. I can tell you, our older folks are getting older, and we're losing our young people, because pediatrics has everything. And then you age out of pediatrics at 21, and there is no comprehensive adult care. And because there's no continuity of care after 21, it's the emergency room that becomes the high utilization. Without continuity of care, the disease progresses. You get more complications, and we're having our young people from 19 to 30 die. And it's an atrocity. It is an atrocity, a human rights atrocity.
Gotcha. Wow. Incredible. So Victor, West Harlem, Community Board 9. How did you guys find and discover that space and become big advocates?
Well, that was mainly through a health committee. We have several different committees on Community Board 9, and a health committee led by Laquita Henry. She jumped into this and put it on the front burner and pushed to get this out there. Conferences, forums, just to make people aware of it. I have to really congratulate her for the work she's done.
Absolutely.
To raise the awareness of the community board itself and the surrounding community. I just happened to have a friend who I introduced her to, Montez Davison.
Oh, yes.
Sickle cell survivor, and a lot of good information was exchanged between the two of them. And we look forward to doing that. We know our community is underserved, and we hope we can be a beacon for helping people here. And I was going to ask Dr. Davis and Dr. Mensah, does anything in the school system? I know, having worked in the school system at one time, that often is a place for gathering and assistance. I don't know if there's anything in the school system where they identify and they can counsel and make referrals, but that could be another advocate for our community. I often see parents that are stressed and they just don't know which way to turn, and things get ignored, and then before that you know it, the child is in a crisis where someone could have helped them, but they just didn't know where to turn to. But in schools, often are a basis for that.
Anybody take that?
Yes, the city council has passed 2 bills in the last 2 years. The first one was for provider education, public testing, and genetic counseling. That was last year. This year, they worked on a bill for all public school students to be identified, those with trait who know they have trait, to receive genetic counseling. For children who don't know that are at risk for having a trait for sickle cell disease, to get tested and get counseling. And for the children who are identified with sickle cell disease, to make sure that they have the resources that they need. So we'll be working with the school-based health clinics to provide literature in all of the schools that the children can take home to their parents. We can have a hand in the genetic counseling to especially explain to children with trait what that means. But the biggest thing we're looking for are children with trait who are symptomatic. And what that means is, if you have more than 40% sickle hemoglobin being produced by your bone marrow, you are at risk under certain conditions to have complications that you would see in disease.
Wow.
We really want to identify those young people so we can get them connected with hematologists like Dr. Mensah, to get continuity of care. And if, those who with more severe complications, then we could start through compassionate use, get them to connected to approved medications, and possibly even, and I don't know, because Dr. May, could we get a child who is symptomatic, age appropriate, who is symptomatic with sickle cell trait with serious complications into clinical trials? Because that's a question I've never asked. So I want to ask that right now.
Yeah, very good question, Ginger. So in general, for clinical trials, they are always have specific restrictions or criteria so that you can have a relatively homogeneous patient population to be able to study the drug. And let's come back to that. For all the clinical trials, actually, is not patient participating in the clinical trial is not the major purpose is not seeking the treatment. When I see the patient participate in the clinical trial is patients volunteer themselves to do the together with the sponsors, FDA and others and physicians to investigate whether the new drug can or cannot work.
Yes.
So that's why there's some requirements for that to make sure we have right data to demonstrate whether it works or not. But Ginger, as exactly you mentioned, to say sometimes when you establish pretty good safety and efficacy profile, you may expand the population, not for clinical trial, but for compassionate use or expanded the access, so that allow a few more patients who are very, very sick and very severe with no other choices, probably is right thing for them to access these not approved investigational drug. So that's the process in there too. To answer your question.
Gotcha. And Dr. Mensah, help me out. Maybe about 2.5 to 3 years ago, and I know all of you know this, especially when we talk about some of these social influences. And I heard you, Dr. Davis, in terms of, let's say, racism entering into some of this stuff. There was a big kind of like a push for focus on ALS, but it seems to kind of like have dissipated. I don't see it much. But has there ever been any social advocacy for sickle cell that you know of?
Oh, well, I'll say definitely organizations like Gingers have brought awareness to sickle cell disease, especially I would say around the months of June and the months of September. We have World Sickle Cell Days. That's when I see like the biggest push online. Sickle cell patients, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they have Facebook forums, they share which doctors they have, which medications that they're on. So there is like a big network. In terms of like a big ALS like overall challenge, I would say I haven't seen it reach that height. Gotcha. But I definitely think that there are definitely organizations and patients and advocates who bring awareness, especially to June and September, online, and you could see it everywhere.
So Dr. Davis, yeah, that's true. Huh?
So Juneteenth is also World Sickle Cell Day.
Oh,
that's because the West African mother of a child with sickle cell had gone to her head of state and said, "Can we do a bill in the UN to recognize sickle cell disease as a serious health concern?" So in 2005 that happened. 2008 the UN passed a resolution on sickle cell, A63-237. If y'all want to look it up, and it has 7 points, so they're very good. But I gotta say, they dropped the ball after that. For the first 3 years, our organization was involved. We actually co-hosted the first World Sickle Cell Day conference at the United Nations in June 19, 2010. Right, and now it has become a global thing, and so this is our 16th year in doing this, and we're involved with the group that is funded by Johns Hopkins called Synergy. So it's the Northeast Regional Collaboration of Organizations from New Hampshire to West Virginia, and we do. Synergy came up with Shine the Light on Sickle Cell Day, which we do in June. We usually carry through the year, but it's really for Juneteenth. And then September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And we do not get the same support and recognition as other diseases. When you look at the NFL, they do cancer in October, and everything. We have reached out to the NFL to do that. No response.
Whoa.
BA, and I'm going to send so ball for sickle cell. If y'all look up ball for sickle cell, Wilson and NBA did create a ball for us, black ball with one of the sections in red to look like a cell. And so the slogan is eyeball for sickle cell. And a nurse, Molly Lawson from New York Presbyterian, she's the one who got that kicked off. And so balls are being shipped out to hospitals all over the country, to community-based organizations. And we've been taking, I have pictures on my phone I have to post, but people holding that ball with the tag eyeball for sickle cell. And the thing is, we need the NBA to support that, and they're not supporting it in the way we need them to do that. Why isn't it halftime that ball bought out? When they have people shooting hoops and during halftime. A perfect time to raise awareness for sickle cell disease, and we didn't get that. And so the only players that we've been able to who are joining us in this campaign are retired players. I don't think that, especially since you have players in NBA who have sickle cell trait, who have children with sickle cell disease. Same thing. It's more than 100 players in NFL that have the trait, and many who have children with disease. And I can say this, I've spoken to retired players that say, they use it like a sword of Damocles, where they can't mention it. They just look for an excuse to get somebody out of their contract. And that's because we've had, players like Deion Sanders and Ryan Clark who had gotten sick and it ended their career. So, speak up, you're out. And so get these people until they are.
So back up for a second, Doc. So you're saying that Ryan Clark and Deion Sanders, they had a sickle cell?
Yes, they have sickle cell trait, not disease. And I don't know if you remember a few years ago playing in Denver, Ryan Clark collapsed on the field. He went to the hospital because of the altitude and the exertion. His it became impacted and it got swollen, and his gallbladder also became inflamed, and they had to remove both of them. And so when he went to Denver, he had to be benched. He couldn't play in Denver, because of the high altitude, and eventually he retired. And he started a foundation in Pittsburgh where he lived and played. And then you had Bobby Ingram, who became an advocate after, who had a 16-year-old daughter, unfortunately died at that age from complications associated with sickle cell. And we currently have a player now with a young child. I think is really the first one. I'd say Bobby was kind of, vocal, but this couple are very vocal, and they do stuff with the national organization, the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, to advocate for sickle cell disease. And I don't see why in September, the league, we aren't wearing red, and sickle cell paraphernalia, and talking about that during halftime and during interviews. We even had Solomon Wilcox, who has 3 shows, who was being paid as a spokesperson, and not once on any of his 3 shows did he ever talk about sickle cell. He'd show up, take pictures, but that's all.
Wow.
And so we need more support from people in media. From notable characters. This used to happen in the past with R.C. Davis, Ruby D, Bill Cosby. There were a lot of entertainers who supported sickle cell back in the day.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Yes, gotcha.
Ask them. They want money we can't afford to pay them.
And Doc, I'm stupefied because remember the dominance of the black athlete in the NFL and the NBA, and they also can control, of course, the players' associations. So that could be a demand, but I hear you.
It is a demand, but when
Dr. Davis, I want to go back to something you told us a little earlier, because first of all, you've been dropping a lot of knowledge on us. Now, I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this whole interview just to understand everything and absorb it. But you mentioned a kind of a mark where you said 40% hemoglobin was a warning sign that if you reach this level that you really were in danger. And I wondered if you could reiterate that and put it in a framework that how do people ask their own care providers to make sure that they look for this?
So the bone marrow produces red blood cells, right? And hemoglobin is the iron component inside blood that gives blood its red color and carries the oxygen molecule.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have sickle cell trait, you inherited one trait from one parent. Disease is one trait from each parent. So now you have two recessive genes. So you have, in percentages, if you are a person with trait with 40% or more, and you have a job or you are engaged in sports and you exert yourself, or you're at high altitudes, you become dehydrated, it can cause your cells to start sickling, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first
Mm-hmm.
organ to be impacted is your kidneys, second, your heart.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
condition is called rhabdomyolysis, right? There's also a kidney disease that is common to sickle cell trait that you really don't ever hear about. And I'd like Dr. Mensah to talk about that. But having sickle cell trait is not completely benign. It really depends on how much sickling your bone marrow, sickle blood cell, your bone marrow produces. And if you exert yourself as an athlete or on the job, in extreme cold, you become dehydrated, you can start to be impacted by sickle cell trait. And it's very important that this information gets out, that people understand if they have the trait, what trait they carry, and the percentage of sickle hemoglobin that their bone marrow produces, so they can do things like stay hydrated, keep water on you at all times. And hydrate means water, not juice, not soda, but water. To when you get tired, to rest, take a rest, right? And if you start feeling pain, or you start feeling funny, and then it's not good, go to a doctor immediately. We've had
Gotcha.
athletes and military people die because they're like, come on, suck it up, get up, get up, get up. And the third time they collapsed, they were dead.
Wow. Wow.
Now, how do they test for that 40% marker? Is that something that your average physician can do, or is that a hospital test?
Yes, your doctor can do it. The hospital can do it. If you're going to a clinic, it's called the hemoglobin electrophoresis. It's the most definitive test for sickle cell trait, sickle cell disease, and they'll get a whole list of things regarding your blood, that they can sit down and talk with you afterwards. You may need to see a genetic counselor, but definitely everybody who knows they have the trait but don't know what trait they have should be retested for them to know, because it's significant if you're childbearing age and you want to have a family. That's when it's significant. If you're young and you want to have children, you need to know your status, and you then need to know the status of the person that you're going to be having children with. It's not, oh, it's not in my family, it's silent. You need to take them to your doctor and have them tested, or go to a Department of Health clinic, and whether you have insurance or not, you can go to a Department of Health clinic and get tested, and then get counseled afterwards.
And let me understand, because I did hear early on that in terms of, let's say, parents, let's say you have the trait, the other parent has a trait, they should definitely not marry, right? Is it a guarantee that, let's say you have a child, that the child will have sickle cell? Is that a guarantee? Okay, it's not. All right. Gotcha. Dr. Mensah, go ahead.
Yes. So if both parents have the trait, the child, they could have four choices, and so there's a 25% chance that the child won't have anything. That they'll both get the healthy genes from their parents. There's a 50% chance that the child may see a sickle cell trait, like both of the parents. There's a 25% chance that the child will have sickle cell disease. And so it's not a guarantee. And I think the other thing too, I want to say, in the United States with IVF, they can isolate embryos that don't have sickle cell disease. And so if the parents had sickle cell trait and they wanted to marry and have children, there are ways with technology where they could select to have children who don't have sickle cell disease as well.
Wow, beautiful. And so, Dr. May, we certainly do know that in terms of medications, medicines produced are to control symptoms, to make the ride through the journey a lot easier. Are there any drugs being, let's say, produced that are preventive?
Yeah, so the diseases in their way, when we do the gene therapy, is able to treat the patient and have one-time therapy that Editas were working on called Reni-cel, is to be able to treat both sickle cell and thalassemia and be able to have one-time therapy with the bone marrow, with autologous bone marrow transplant, and then the patient will be able to do not have a sickle cell symptom or do not have a severe sickle cell symptom anymore. So that's the direction we're all working on.
Nice.
Right now, this study already have been really advanced and moving good direction. And then additionally, in Editas also, as well as others, we're also looking for the therapy does not require bone marrow transplant. And we call it in vivo gene editing. You can do an IV injection for once, then you'll be able to treat the sickle cell disease.
Wow.
And that goes to what we discussed earlier that Cheryl also mentioned, and DJ LeRoy, you mentioned that too. How about Africa, right? If we can develop such medicine that can do in vivo gene editing, essentially we put the gene editing instrument and machinery into the human being that can do the editing by itself, does not require bone marrow transplant. That's something Editas is also working on, in addition to Reni-cel that is currently on clinical trials.
Beautiful, beautiful. And NightWatchman, I guess we got a lightning round, huh?
Absolutely.
All right. So on that note, Victor, inquiring minds want to know, Community Board and I, how to get involved. Let's say I want to attend one of the public meetings of the committee. Do tell, how do we do that? And how do we find you guys?
CB9.org. You can go to our website and look, and you'll see all the different committees we have. Our meetings are held monthly. Excuse me. And like I said, we do forums at the Columbia Forum on 125th. So you can reach out that way. Our board office is at 3295 Broadway at 133rd Street. Open 5 days a week. You can stop at any time and speak to the people there. I'm glad to have anybody come and help us out and make suggestions.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. Of course, Dr. Davis, do tell, getting involved with your nonprofit and advocacy group, do tell, how do we do that?
You can find us on the web at SCTPN.net. So that's the acronym you see there next to my name, SCTPN, Sickle Cell Thalassemia Patients Network.net. Our office number is 347-533-8485. And you can email us at social@sctpn.net. You can find us we have 2 Facebook pages, Instagram, X, Twitter. We got it all. X is Twitter and TikTok. So we're wide across, and then we have affiliates and chapters throughout New York State, the Virgin Islands, Uganda, Gambia, and Belize. So you can find us internationally as well through our affiliates and chapters. And we not only want families to come to get social supports and care coordination, we also need people from the community to join our organization to help us do this mission work. You know, we've existed as an organization, as a volunteer organization for 36 years because people from the community came in to support what we were doing to provide help for families that needed it. And I'm saying this for our global entity, we need people to step up, and to be there to help us support because there's so many people, like I said, 12 to 14,000 in New York State. And we need you here. Our office is 1139 St. John's Place, Brooklyn, New York, and that's between Hampton Place and Albany in Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. And we have, chapters in Manhattan as well with Amina K. So here in the city, we're very well placed. And anywhere you need a Staten Island, we're coming. We're coming Staten Island,
all right.
Long Island also. So find us just about anywhere you need us. And I want to say thank you to Mr. Edwards for being the catalyst to start this with his initial introduction to Laquita Henry. Laquita, thank you.
Yes.
It's been a constant for the last 2-3 months in speaking, and this got us here. And I appreciate all of you, Night Watchmen and DJ LeRoy, for
Nope,
show.
LeRoy.
LeRoy, excuse me, LeRoy, for your show, because having talk shows like this to get information out about important things that affect our communities, you'll make it happen, and I want to thank you for that. And also want to thank Cheryl Mensah, who's a partner in crime, and Dr. May, to help this conversation along.
Beautiful, beautiful. On that note, Dr. Mensah, do tell parting words.
Hi. So I see patients at Phelps Memorial in Sleepy Hollow. My office number is 914-366-1625. I am on Instagram and TikTok under NY Sickle Cell Doc. I'm not as active as I should be, but you can always send me a message and find me there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Doc. And Dr. May, parting words.
Yes. I want to mention that we at Editas Medicine, as a small biotech, we work closely with the patient community. So please contact us. We're happy to work together, and we like to see more champions like Ginger and others in the field. So the website is editasmedicine.com. Thank you.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you, Doc. And Night Watchman, that means you're up. Take us home, buddy.
Oh, the pressure. All right. You've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3, the voice of Harlem. Also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. You can always find us on Monday night, 7 p.m. on the radio, 8 p.m. on your favorite live stream channels. I want to thank this panel for tremendously informative. I learned more about sickle cell. We've been hearing about it for years, but no one has ever actually told us about it. And so I appreciate the work that all of you are doing, and to the work that everybody is doing in this field to bring more awareness and to get people the information and medicine that they need to combat this problem.
So thank you for are you telling me that everybody here is being invited back to the cookout? Is that what you're saying? Absolutely. Wow. Okay, very good. All right. Now, the only thing I do have to say, any and everyone who has not yet submitted your portrait, headshot, or what is the other thing? This brief bio, please do that through the portal, okay?